So far, the only thing missing from the vintage signal chain of console, EQ, and tape that Waves put together for the Abbey Road collection is the input itself, models of vintage microphones. But here, Waves elected to do something a little different than modeling the sonics of the usual classic mics that Abbey Road certainly had in their mic closet at the time all this gear was in use. Instead, they decided to model the sound of 3 completely unique mics that were originally designed by EMI for the sole use of the royal family in Britain. These mics, dating back to the 1920s and 30s, are not the usual high-end condensers or ribbons that are typically employed in studio recording at a facility of Abbey Road's caliber. They'd fall more in the category of what you'd call character mics. Each one imparts a distinctive sonic signature on the signal run through it. Not a full frequency range response, but a more resonant, somewhat band-limited response. Kind of like a more subtle version of the popular filtered telephone voice effect, where there's a mid-range peak and the highs and lows are somewhat attenuated. As their names suggest, each of these mics was designed to be used by a particular monarch: King George V, King George VI, and Queen Elizabeth. The mics had been in storage for years, until a few years back they were brought out of retirement to be used in the recording of music and dialogue for the film The King's Speech, which centered on the character of King George VI. The mics were used to recreate the vintage radio tone of the speeches in the film, as they would have been heard back in the day, and Waves decided that their vintage character would make for a good plug-in, something to add a little color to voices and other instruments when that kind of quality was desired. The oldest mic is the George V model. The original was a carbon mic, a fairly lo-fi type of design, like you'd find in an older telephone headset. It has the most colored response of all of them, but maybe because of that, it's my favorite of the bunch. I think it has the most character. The other 2 mics are moving coil designs, like standard dynamic mics employ, although these older mics don't have the flatter, more neutral frequency response that modern moving coil models deliver. Waves assumes these mics were designed for outdoor use, like giving speeches, to be used in place of the more hi-fi but much more delicate ribbon mics of the day. The plug-in itself couldn't be simpler. Each of the microphones has 3 response curves: close, ambient, and natural. Close captures the sound of the mic a few centimeters, a couple of inches, from the source.
I watch her walking down the street. I see her driving in her car.
Ambient emulates the response at a distance of about 1.5 feet or so.
Wondering who she's going to meet.
And natural is just the actual frequency response of the mic itself, without any ambience or low-end or mid-range boost from proximity, like with close.
I want to love her from afar.
I'll briefly run a little white noise through each of them so you can see the different frequency responses on a spectrum graph. As you can see, all the mics have a pronounced mid-range rise at around 3 to 4 kilohertz, and a fairly steep roll-off above that. This peak is strongest on the oldest mic, the George V model. The close position adds an emphasis on the upper bass, lower mid-range. And the ambient settings have the least bass of all. All the options represent the on-axis response of the mics, pointing straight at the sound source. On voices, the mics impart a nice, filtered vintage quality to the sound of the vocal. This is often done with EQ to add a particular color to a vocal part, but the more complex response curves of these mics make the effect here both subtler and richer. Next up, I'll compare each mic at each of the different settings so you'll get the idea of the different sounds on tap here.